This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Landmark College, offering 360-degree support for students with learning disabilities, ADHD, and ASD. Learn more at lcdistraction.org. Landmark College, we teach differently.
One question that I always ask myself is, if I speak up right now, is what I have to say true? Is it kind? And is it an improvement upon the silence?
Hello, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell, and welcome to Distraction, the podcast that focuses on modern life and the antidote to distraction, which is connection. Today, we are lucky enough to have one of my favorite people on the show. I've known this brilliant, talented woman for a long time. I must be 20, 25 years. And I met her because I saw a photograph of her in the Boston Globe. She was doing karate. Turns out she has a black belt in karate. And then I read the article about her, and she was talking about mindfulness and meditation. And I thought, goodness, someone who is into meditation who does karate, I really want to meet her. So I went about the process of trying to connect with her, and we had lunch, and we've been friends ever since. And she works in my office in Sudbury. To give her credentials doesn't do her justice, but her credentials are that she's a speech-language pathologist and a neurotherapist. She specializes in alternative treatments, non-medication treatments for ADHD, anxiety, and, whatever ails you mentally, basically. And she truly is brilliant. She's so innovative. This woman is a remarkable, multi-talented, one of those people who's pretty much good at everything she decides to tackle. And I'm so lucky to have known her as long as I have, and the patients who come to my office and get to meet her universally rave about this woman. Her name is Rebecca Shafir, S-H-A-F-I-R. I know her as Becky, but formally it's Rebecca Shafir. And the name of her book is The Zen of Listening, Mindful Communication in the Age of Distraction. It is a brilliant book. I refer people to it all the time. I welcome you to get it and read it, but we're lucky enough now to be able to hear about it from the author herself. Welcome to Distraction, Becky.
Thank you, Ned.
It's so nice to have you here. We're going to talk about listening, and, I'm a psychiatrist. I'm supposed to be a good listener, but I'm not as good a listener as you are. Why is mindful listening a valuable and necessary skill?
Ned, mindful listening is the basis for satisfying relationships, good health, and if you dig deep into the causes of divorce, drug abuse, and violence, much of the time you'll find that poor listening is to blame. And it is quite an endemic problem throughout our society. You see it every day in interactions with people. You see it in businesses. You see it, of course, in relationships, and it's definitely an area that needs improvement.
How is mindful listening different from active listening or just attentive listening?
Well, it's one of the reasons I wrote the book, Ned, because I was so curious about how people can improve their listening. So I would sit in, this was years ago, I would sit in on these business workshops on listening to see what they're trying to teach. And it was this active listening technique. But what I saw there was more like an act like you're listening method. Anything that they could put into an hour workshop and feel that their employees are leaving with a sense of listening was really, not happening at all, which is why I developed mindful listening. So mindful listening is a very different animal. It consists of 4 characteristics. The first one is the ability to take in the whole message, not just what the person is saying, but the tone, the facial expression, the gestures, even the silences scream meaning. So that's one characteristic. The other is the ability to sustain attention over time, even if it's just 30 seconds or 1 minute of concentrated, wholehearted listening is more than some people get in a lifetime. So that ability to sustain attention and to appreciate silence, to be able to allow silence. The third characteristic is a listener who makes the speaker feel valued and respected despite the difference of opinion. And the fourth and the most difficult characteristic that I still work on, and the hardest for many people, is that ability to listen to yourself, to pick your words carefully, to be sensitive to the sensibilities of your listener. And those four characteristics equal a mindful listener.
Let's just repeat those, okay?
Yes. The ability to get the whole message, not just the words, but the nonverbal messages.
The entire message, okay.
Right. The ability to sustain attention over time, allowing silence, right? Number 3, to make that speaker feel valued and respected. And fourth, the ability to listen to oneself.
Now, let's talk about each one of those in a little bit more detail, starting with the last one. You said the most difficult. Listening to yourself, as we're talking now, if I paused and selected each word before I spoke it, my speech would slow down to about one word every 5 seconds. So no one consciously selects their words before they speak them. So what do you mean by selecting your words carefully and listening to yourself?
Well, we've all heard of hot button words, right?
Yeah.
This is what I mean. Avoiding words like should. The adage, don't should on me and I won't should on you. Things like that.
Most people call it adage, but I like
adage.
I like adage. That's great.
That's the Midwestern way.
The adage. That's the French way, right? The adage. Don't should on me and I won't should on you. That's a great one.
And you know something else?
I'd never heard that adage, by the way.
Yeah, isn't that a good one?
It's a good adage.
I mean, should is definitely a turn-off to people.
Yeah,
So it's picking words that could spark some kind of ill feeling or be a listening stopper.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. And the other thing, and you may have noticed this in meetings that we've had together, is that I'm rather silent a lot of the time. And one question that I always ask myself is, if I speak up right now, is what I have to say true? Is it kind? And is it an improvement upon the silence? Does it really add anything to the conversation that's meaningful? So that's what I mean by the ability to listen to yourself before you speak.
One of the problems people with ADD have, like me, is that we don't have much of a filter. We don't have much of a pause button.
Right.
What are we supposed to do?
Well, this is one of my solutions, one of the ways to become more mindful, and that is to practice being silent, still, and screenless. And meditation is great practice, is going for a walk without your cell phone. Taking those times to be still, to be quiet, to appreciate silence is often where I have to start with people who want to improve their listening, because they're not quiet in their own mind. How can they be quiet in listening to someone else and actually taking in what they're saying?
So will you just sit in silence with a client sometimes?
Absolutely. And they don't know what to do with it. We're so uncomfortable with silence. But it's becoming comfortable with silence, Ned, that helps you get to the depth of what someone is saying. They may come into your office and say, oh, I'm all upset, I'm all anxious, and you allow some silence, and then they give you more information, and then you allow a little more silence, and they actually get to the heart of the problem, and it saves so much time. But if we can't allow those few seconds pause time, of silence, will never quite get to the root of the problem. And this is endemic in healthcare, because what happens typically in a doctor-patient visit is that the doctor, and this is documented, that the doctor will interrupt the patient 13 seconds or less into the interaction, and the patient doesn't get a chance to really talk about what they think is ailing them or what they think is a good solution. So very important to allow that silence. You can save a lot of time and energy, frankly.
Such good advice. Now, the first element of mindful listening, you said, is to take in the entirety of the scene. Any tips on that?
Well, many suggestions. First of all, to realize that what people say is not necessarily what they mean. Okay? This is when we talk about when I work with physicians. I gave several workshops when I was at Leahy Clinic for physicians on bedside manner and actually watching the patient, not looking at their e-book or their computer as they're speaking to someone, which is happening now. You see this quite a bit when you go in for your physical. They're looking at their computer and not really looking at you, right? Because they have to type in all this data, and your patient visit has to be less than 15 minutes. But keeping an eye on that person, again, allowing the silence, watching their body movements, looking at their eye gaze, at listening to the tone of their speech tells you so much more than just the words. There's like 11 different ways to say, "Oh, I'm okay, doc." But, adding all that other information helps you really see how okay they really are. It's fascinating to watch.
Particularly true of male patients.
Yes.
They rarely will tell you what's really going on. And and element number 2?
Being able to sustain your attention over time.
You see, I'd already forgotten it. See, that's how poor I am at sustaining attention over time. So I that's why I wanted to repeat. So sustain attention over time. How do you train yourself to do that, particularly in this age of distraction, and particularly for someone like me who has attention deficit trait?
It's very hard to do. Well, meditation is very helpful, but what I practice in my sessions is periodically throughout our conversation, I will let them know that I'm going to hold them accountable for telling me what I just had to say. It's great practice. It's very difficult at first.
But see, I'm sorry to interrupt, Vicki, but the problem with that with me is I would just start, it would increase pressure, so I would just start fixating on what I'm supposed to remember, and I wouldn't be listening to you.
Certainly, if we start off that way, but we always start off with just some sustained relaxation, some breathing that calms the whole body. And we start in a very general way. In other words, I might speak to them for about 30 seconds, and then I'll say, "Tell me anything you remember from that." Anything at all. It could be one word, it could be a talking point, it could be several things, but just one thing. Then we start increasing that length of time and say, "Can you tell me more now about what I just said? Can you give me a general idea?" So we take the pressure away and we turn on their radar for picking up just general features of the conversation so that they can tell back, even if it's just a few points, because that gives them confidence that they were able to lock in and stay with me for the duration, even if a short duration, of the conversation. It's a marvelous technique, and it enhances their ability to say, "Yeah, I can process that, I can stay with it. My mind may have drifted to other things, but I was able to bring myself back and walk away with a decent understanding of what we talked about." And that right there, Ned, is a huge improvement for many people.
You see, for me, it really takes repetition. I don't remember something unless I've heard it at least 3 times. And then even better, if the interviewer, say you, asks me to repeat what you just said. in my own words, not verbatim, but in my own words. And then the third one was?
Making your speaker feel valued and respected for what they had to say. So look at the political discussions that people are having these days. Everybody walks away mad, right? But how about saying, hey, I disagree with you, or here's my point of view. I feel no less about you, and I just want to know I appreciate hearing your side of the story. How wonderful is that? But how often do you hear that?
Well, you and I do it, don't we? We disagree politically, but don't you feel that I respect your point of view?
I do.
Yeah, and I feel you respect my point of view.
And I do, because you know something? If we listen to different points of view, we just might learn something.
Right, exactly.
Right? So I learn a lot from listening to you and listening to people who think like you do. This is why I say to people, you just want to listen to your one channel. I said, why don't you, for a few laughs, just listen to some other commentators. Get a balanced view.
Exactly.
This is all about critical thinking, your ability to take in the big picture and then make your own assumptions. See how listening intrudes so much in our lives.
What do you do if what you are hearing makes you angry?
Well, you can accept the anger. You can say, oh, that's very different from what how I think, and it makes me very upset. You can accept that. There's nothing that says you have to deny your feelings, but maybe ask yourself, why does it anger you so much? And this has to do with listening to other angry people. What makes them so angry? I just want to understand. What makes me so angry when I hear that? I want to understand.
Doesn't anger get in the way of listening?
Oh, certainly it does. And this is probably one of the greatest problems people have, and the most frequently occurring question I get, Ned, is how do I listen to difficult people? Physicians will often ask, how do I listen to these angry people?
And the answer is?
And the answer is, if you're a good listener, you won't have many difficult or angry people in your lives. Because imagine if you're angry and you come into me and you're all upset about something, and I don't give you a fight. In fact, I lean in and I really want to understand. I want to get into your movie. I want to see where you're coming from. Do you notice how the sound of your voice will start to calm down? How you'll be able to speak more coherently? The mindful listener can create an atmosphere where anger doesn't exist in a conversation.
That's it makes me think of Abraham Lincoln's great remark. He said, I have destroyed my enemies by turning them into my friends.
Exactly.
And one way to turn an enemy into a friend is to listen.
Well, here's a really good tip that follows up with that.
Yeah.
People say, if there's one thing I need to do in order to be a better listener, what is it? And I'll tell them, don't raid the conversation. RAID is the acronym RAID. Now, these are the things that provoke angry conversations. Number one, the R stands for rambling. The A stands for advice giving. That's unrequested advice giving. The I stands for interruption. And the D is for denial. Denying someone their reality is one way to really provoke and exacerbate a conversation.
I feel bad because I've interrupted you several times.
Well, for good reason. Oh, but you haven't. You've actually overlapped. You've added information or you've asked for clarification.
Well, that's a very kind way of reframing it. So you've just demonstrated making me feel respected.
There you go.
Yeah. And so another question, what keeps people from wanting to take these tips seriously and work on them and improve their skill at listening?
There's several listening myths out there that I work to dispel, and we address these things usually in our first conversation. And one of them is it takes too much time to listen. As if 1 minute is too much time, you know?
Yeah.
So it takes too much time, which is definitely not the case. I underscore to people that if you can listen for 30 seconds to somebody in a mindful way, that is the greatest thing. That is like gold to people. You know, when I do my talks on mindful listening, I'll ask people, I'll say, hey, how many of you have really ever been heard wholeheartedly for more than 30 seconds? And I'll see like 3 hands, you know? So mindful listening does not necessarily mean taking more time to listen. It just means better quality time. You know, that's one myth. The other myth is, do I have to listen to everyone? And I'll say, no. Why don't we just start with the people in your life that are precious and important to you? Let's start there. Right? And then we can decide if we have any more listening minutes allowed, and we allow ourselves. We can spread that out. But think of it as, I just want to start trying to do my best listening to the people who are precious and important to me. And the other myth is, I'm thinking that if I listen too much in a meeting or in a relationship, that I'm putting myself in a less powerful position. That I'm subordinate to that person. I say, no. You're actually the more powerful person because you're taking in what they really want. This is, a key to negotiation, right? You're taking in what they really want. You're taking in all the different opinions at the table, and you're actually more powerful in that way. Yeah?
So how can we start down that journey to become a mindful listener?
Okay. Well, like the first suggestion we mentioned is to take more time being silent, still, and screenless. Just like you suggest in your books, too. Goes a long way. We have to start there. So it could start with meditation, with taking a walk every day without your electronics, with just shutting off the electronics and allowing yourself to be bored. For short periods of time, we need to be able to contain ourselves if we want to offer ourselves to others. The other thing that you can do is notice if you raid the conversation. If you could just hold off on giving advice, that could be major. I just had a student, I think someone who was referred by you actually, who came into me with his mom, who was complaining that she never listens to me. She never listens to me. And as I listened to them interact, she was raiding all over the place, rambling on about what a bad kid he is, all the troubles he's had, giving advice that he didn't want to hear, interrupting him, and denying his reality. And we had to start right there. I said, hey, do you notice? Can you pick one of those things that you can hold off on doing? Because it could be the game changer. And she says, well, I'm not going to give advice anymore. I said, great. That could be huge. These are the little pieces, the little things that we can change.
Oh, but those are big. I love those. Ramble, advice, interrupt, deny. I mean, that, and people do that so often. It's just, they're unstoppable. And I see it in my work with parents and children all the time. The parents who just can't stop giving advice, interrupting, denying the kids' reality, and it just it's happens so much. They're big, Becky. Those are golden. Those are golden nuggets. Well, I think, as always, you've enlightened me, and I've known you all these years, and you've taught me in these few minutes, as you always do. If a listener wanted to get a hold of your book, The Zen of Listening, Mindful Communication in the Age of Distraction, would they find that on Amazon?
Yes, they can find it on Amazon. It's in its 8th printing.
Wow,
Ned,
Becky,
isn't that something after all these years?
That's
Listening never dies.
That's remarkable. Well, it's in jeopardy today, as you point out.
Yes.
But people really need this book. And if they actually wanted to see you in person, if they live in the Boston area, what's the phone number to reach you?
That would be at the Hallowell Center. It's 978-287-0810.
And ask for Rebecca Shafir. She's an absolutely enchanting and intelligent woman. I commend you to call her and have a personal session if you live close enough to Sudbury, Massachusetts, which is just about 20 miles west of Boston. Or go to mindfulcommunication.com, her website, and by all means get her book, The Zen of Listening, Mindful Communication in the Age of Distraction. Listening really is one of those tools that no matter who you are or what age you're at, will improve your life in every way. It'll improve your business life, your romantic life, your family life, and your relationship with yourself. Becky, I can't thank you enough for joining us on this podcast. You're a gem. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ned. It was my pleasure. Thank you for your time.
So my heartfelt thanks to Rebecca Becky Shafir, that's Shafir, for joining us today. Wasn't she great? I always learn talking to her, listening to her. If you'd like to learn more about Rebecca and her work, you can click the link in the episode description or go directly to her website, mindfulcommunication.com, where you can also sign up for her newsletter, Mindful Communication Minute. And as I said, if you want to see her in person and you live in the Boston area, call the center that I run, 978-287-0810. That's 978-287-0810. And if you like what you're hearing, and haven't done so already, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate it. It helps us grow the community that we're trying to grow, the community of interested people who are, curious and like wondering about life these days. As always, if you have a question for me or a show idea, please, please, please send it to connect, the word connect, at distractionpodcast.com. We love to hear from you. Please consider recording your question as a voice memo on your phone and emailing it to us that way. It makes it very easy for us to answer your question on the show if we have a recording of it. Just try to keep your question under a minute if you can, and a minute is pretty long. Or you can always call us directly at 844-55-CONNECT and leave us a voicemail there as well. We truly look forward to hearing from you, and we do our absolute best to get back to every single person who calls or emails. Before I get to the credits, I just want to give you a quick heads up that I have a new book coming out in June 12th to be exact, that is available for pre-order now. It's called Because I Come From a Crazy Family, The Making of a Psychiatrist. It's unlike anything I've written before. It's a memoir. It's the first book I've ever written where I didn't have to give advice. There's no advice in this book whatsoever. It's just a lot of stories about my family when I was a little boy growing up in Chatham on Cape Cod and Charleston, South Carolina, my years at Exeter for high school, Harvard for college, Tulane for medical school, and then my early years in training as a psychiatrist. I don't get into my work with ADD at all. Instead, it's about the rather chaotic but really quite wonderful childhood I had and the eccentric, crazy people that populated it. And then how that guided me in my education and early years in becoming a psychiatrist. Again, the title is Because I Come From a Crazy Family, The Making of a Psychiatrist. I'll tell you more about the new book in future episodes and actually read some excerpts. But I wanted to give you a quick heads up now that it's available for pre-order. And that really helps with the book. If we get a lot of pre-orders, then the publishers see that there's real interest, and they'll help get it out there. This is the business of bookselling that I've never really mastered, but I'm trying to do it right this time. Click the link in the show notes to pre-order your copy now, or just go directly to Amazon or any other online bookseller and pre-order it now. Because I Come From a Crazy Family, The Making of a Psychiatrist.
Hey, Hey guys, it's Sarah here, producer on Distraction. Just a heads up that we have a new sister podcast out, the Royal Wedding Podcast with Rob Shuter, bringing you news, updates, and interviews every week leading up to the noble nuptials. This week's guest is the Cake Boss. So go to royalweddingpodcast.com and subscribe.
Distraction is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people. Our audio engineer is the remarkably talented and strikingly handsome Scott Person. And our producer is the unbelievably imaginative and dedicated Sarah Gurton.